Palm Sunday, Good Friday, Ramadan, Ramanavami, Passover, and Easter all occur within days of each other this year. So when there's a confluence of religious celebrations like this, it can only mean one thing: spring is in the air. Sing joyous spring. It's thrilling watching the wood giants outside my window change their seasonal clothes, the sticky, sweet-smelling, ambrosia-filled buds ready to burst winter's seams. Renewing life transforms the hard, cold grayscale of winter into the lush, verdant grasses and softly washed pastel skies of spring. Sing joyous spring. A multitude of holidays cluster around spring because we first form our ideas about the world by observing and reacting to it. Spring has inspired humans to think about life, death, and rebirth for tens of thousands, maybe even millions of years, actually. It turns out that the earliest hominids, including our friend Ardipithecus here, roamed Africa entirely dependent on nature's whimsy for shelter and sustenance. Well, it only takes a couple of seasons for Ardi to notice that the trees, seemingly dead in winter, burst back into full-bowed life in the spring. A few seasons more, and entire tribes realized the seed that they plant in the ground grows food every season as well. Every year, life seems to retreat and return. Like clockwork, you might think, if clocks had been invented. It's natural to watch Earth's flora and fauna slumber and awaken, and wonder if the same thing happens to us. Is death merely sleep until next spring? I assume our ancestors noticed pretty quickly that dead humans don't come back to life every season, an absolutely terrifying thought, frankly. Over the eons, the fact there isn't a mass zombie uprising every March, even while the trees and some animals appear to return to life after a deceptively long slumber, it made us consider what does happen to us after we die, and to ask, if we don't wake up here, is it possible we wake up somewhere else? At some point, humans came to believe in an afterlife. Sometime in, say, the 10th or 11th century before the Common Era, the Iranian prophet Zoroaster introduced concepts about death that would become the foundation of Jewish, Christian, and even some Greco-Roman thought as well. Afterlife trials, for example, the crossing of a river, in this case a river of tears, and final judgment are all Zoroastrian innovations. Early Jewish people of the region adapted Zoroastrianism and developed Sheol, an absolutely final resting place with no judgment. Once a person died, no matter their lot in life, prince or pickpocket, their soul went to Sheol, and that was the end of it. Of course, religion evolves, and as the Mediterranean cultures became more enmeshed in each other's civilizations and daily activities, cross-cultural influences became more pervasive. Hellenization profoundly influenced Judaism. And when the Greeks translated the Hebrew Bible, Sheol became Hades, paving the unstoppable road toward belief in afterlife-gated communities. One for good folks, one for bad folks. That's so prevalent now in contemporary society, unfortunately. Well, I've been thinking about all of our different afterlife concepts because it occurred to me that the way we think about the afterlife affects the way we live in this one. And this all started because I was thinking about Jesus' entry into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. I mean, it's quite a remarkable, insanely courageous act. Why does he do it? Where does he get the strength to face Rome, the greatest empire the planet's ever hosted? Is Jesus encouraged, at least in part, because of his more insightful understanding of reality, of what it means to be, even beyond death? Jesus is a teacher of oneness. He knows that there is one thought, one energy, manifest in an uncountable number of avatars like himself and Buddha and Krishna. But he also knows, and desperately wants to teach all of us, I believe, that we are all part of the oneness of God too. This also includes Caesar Augustus and Pilate and Judas. So, understanding this life is one branch in his tree of life, well, in the tree of life, really, because there's only one that we're all sharing. Jesus confidently rides into Jerusalem. And for added effect, he rides in on an ass, a scathing commentary about Augustus, Pilate, and the entire Roman Empire. If the powers that be weren't going to kill him before, Jesus sealed his fate with that stunt. So, knowing he'll be crucified for sedition, Jesus has made his peace with death. I think in part that's because he understands that ultimately his bodily incarnation is not who he is. Jesus in first century Judea is an aspect of God, an avatar, who will perish at the hands of the Roman authorities. Jesus knows and accepts that this is what he's here for. In the last week of his life, at least as described in the Gospels, Jesus seemingly wants to share his understanding of what we would call multidimensional existence with his students. He assures the disciples that death is merely a transition from one season to another. He transfigures right in front of them. And then even the appearances after death are, I think, to show them that life is not rooted in our physical existence. For example, in Matthew chapter 9, verses 18 through 25, he writes, "While Jesus was speaking to them, a ruler came and knelt in front of him, saying, 'My daughter has just died, but come and place your hand on her, and she'll live.' So Jesus and his disciples got up and went with him. Then a woman who'd been bleeding for 12 years came up behind Jesus and touched the hem of his clothes. She thought, 'If I only touch his robe, I'll be healed.' When Jesus turned and saw her, he said, 'Be encouraged, daughter. Your faith has healed you.' And the woman was healed from that time on. When Jesus went into the ruler's house, he saw the flute players and the distressed crowd. He said, 'Go away, because the little girl isn't dead, but is asleep.' But they laughed at him. After he'd sent the crowd away, Jesus went in and touched her hand, and the little girl rose up." The girl isn't dead, but asleep, Jesus says, like a hibernating bear in winter's trees. While wandering the reawakening landscape recently, I noticed that humans in nature address the change of seasons quite differently. In winter, trees shed everything, all of their leafy clothing, while humans pile on as much stuff as possible. I mean, at one point in February, I think, when the trees were imposing even in their stark nakedness, I was wearing 3 shirts, a sweater, a jacket, a hat, and mittens inside the house. To go out, I just duct taped on a layer of that pink fiberglass insulation. I realize now, though, that I should be more like the trees. And in my spiritual winters, strip down to the bare nakedness of everything I think I am, and keep going until I shed it all to make room for new growth and a journey down a new branch on the tree of life. Amen. Our question today: what winter spiritualities are you shedding to make room for springtime's new growth? Or what new spiritual growth is blossoming in you?